I would like to welcome you to a lecture on Persian scientists, poets, and a few other notable Iranians. This lecture is gracefully sponsored by Persian Organization of Iranian Americans, which is coming from you from Atlanta, Georgia. At the start, I would like to thank the organization for this opportunity, as well as thank Professor Garmestani for being so kind to introduce me for this lecture. I would like to basically go into the mode where I don't have to actually show myself. So the project that I'm about to describe to you is in fact been going on for almost 20 years. I've taken up my time because of the fact that going 28 centuries behind for a country which has thousands of civilization and picking up notable ones and the people who have been made a big difference in the civilization of the world at large. It is not an easy task for me, for anybody. Even 20 years is not enough. So I would like to begin this lecture by actually mentioning to you that there is a website for this Persian science history, which is active, and you can download slides from it. The presentation and the forthcoming book, which will be discussed and introduced to you tonight, is dedicated to Iranians all over the globe. The materials used in this book throughout the past 20 years have been based on either social networks as well as regular old-fashioned published books and printed books, which I ordered and studied. Some of them I had to read time and time again to be able to do justice to some of these individuals. This is the cover, front and the back cover of the book, which was designed by my friends in Sydney, Australia, Emily and Tony Nolan. I really appreciate both Tony and Emily's help in not only this part of the book, but also in other front materials and good guidance as well. And the book aim is to produce, well, this is the outline. I have a book aim. I will talk about at least a selection of scientists of Persia from far away until recent years, poets of Iran and recent scientists, engineers, notable artists and painters, final remarks and conclusions. The aim of the book has always been in back of my mind to prepare a historical and factual account of who Persian scientists and poets were or are, and what the Persian or Iranian citizens of all walks of life, as you can see, I don't need to read them to you, who have been able to do. And in doing so, I have gathered numerous Persian Empire and Persian and more recent Iranian Iranian maps and showed where the birthplace of individual scientist or poet was at the time that he or she was born. Again, the project is again tied unavoidably to history of Persia and now Iran. And throughout the years, in spite of invasions and political uprisings and other issues which has confronting the Iranian and the Persians all throughout the history. But we as a people, we have never accepted any of them. We rejected all the outsiders and will have always kept our identities, cultures, and do not really celebrate Independence Day. We have in a summary, we have a couple of chapters which are really unrelated to the title of the book. One chapter on our the Zoroastrian prophet Zardosht. One chapter with Cyrus the Great, essentially could be considered as the founder of the Persian Empire and Persian culture. 21 chapters will be on scientists and 40 perspectives. Chapters are a bit longer in length and perspectives are shorter. And these are some of the ones that you will see here and more in the lecture. About 16 chapters will be on the poets and 20 perspectives on it. And the poets really are going as long as Rudaki of several centuries ago up to recent, like Ahmad Shamlu and Faridun Tawallali and so forth. The additional other things, I have written a couple of chapters on the history of education of medicine and engineering in modern Iran. That's meaning about a century and a half ago up to now. And they talk about Persians who are members of the academies of like National Academy of Engineering, National Academy of Science, the World Academy of Sciences. Then we have a special group among these notable people who some of them were actually not only ministers, but they were also scientists and lawyers and other areas. Those are Bozorgmeh, Nizamul Mulk, Amir Kabir, and Mossadegh as 4 patriotic ministers. And then I have, in addition, 50 more individuals from 11th to 21st century. Of course, I don't need to introduce any Prophet Zoroaster to anybody. The whole world knows him, and his bio and his really data on his life is very sporadic, and we were not able to get a very accurate and consistent data. We know that there's between 1000 or 2000 BC, he was born in the Balkh area of the present Afghanistan, and of course at that time part of the greater Khorasan province. And we all know about the 3 commandments: well-taught thinking, well-spoken word, and well-done action. Cyrus the Great, the founder of the world's first dynasty, was born in Elam province, which is very close to the southwest of current Iran. He was essentially a member of the media, and the media at the time was part of the Persian map coming from southwest of Iran all the way to the north, Azerbaijan, and the current or former Russian Azerbaijan, Soviet Azerbaijan, and Armenia. And then he was born about 590 to 580 BC. This is the map of the Persian Empire when Cyrus the Great was around 40 years old. You can see from all this green area is a vast number of area which runs from on the east from close to India and all the way to Lydia, which is the current Turkey. Now, 210 years later, the followers of Cyrus, like Darius I and Darius II, they expanded the empire in all directions, as you can see, and roughly about 2,500 miles you could go from one point to the other point. Throughout my research on the ancient Persia, I saw a number of innovations which are given credit to the Persians. One was animation, that you can see there is a sequence of pictures that they created for a goat or some other animal jumping from tree branches. That was essentially a crude animation of the 5th century BC. Battery is another innovation, which record shows that they used a clay pot to use some metal and vinegar and some electrolytes, and they devised a battery of between 1/2 to 2 volts, way before Alexander Volta in the 18th and 19th century. Human rights is well known to everybody. The clay cylinder, which was written around 534 BC, and the actual one now is sitting in the British Museum in London. Persians were one of those who first created postal service, especially fast postal service. As I mentioned, between 2,500 miles, which were going from places to place, the empire built a lot of roads to the best technology of the time, and they set aside certain distances and built some stations populated with fresh horses, and the messenger with his package would come to the station, switch the horse and move on to the next station and the next station. And this was impressive even for other nations such as Greece and others. Yakhchal or refrigerator is another innovation which goes back to 400 BC. They created a dome structures where the hot air gradually, of course with water, and then they hot air would go to ascend to the atmosphere, and gradually the water turns into ice. And this dome can also be put on actual existing water supply in any area that they can find, and roughly needs to, and then in the summer they would use it. And I remember when I was a kid in Shiraz, ice was, or yakh was a commodity that you go to the stores and buy it on the stores in the market. So the word yakhchal comes from ice for yakh and chal for the pit and the dome shape that they created that. Of course, another well-known water supply system that was as early as 1000 BC, it was constructing underground supply houses of water, and they would build a canal under, starting from the supply of the water, and gradually bring it to the surface of the earth. And in this case, they were able to use that for agriculture and for drinking water and so forth, and they call it qanat or kariz. And still going on with some areas of the world, including Iran and other neighborhood in Middle East, for arid and semi-arid areas. So to conclude Cyrus's piece, He earned his greatness because he respected people and all the regions that he conquered. Their religion was and beliefs were respected. He even reassigned the old king to take care of that kingdom, and then would become affiliated with the empire as part of the kings of the kingdom. And he freed all the Jews in Babylon in 535 BC, and he also was able to create what now are saying United Kingdom. Way before Britain and England and Scotland and other formed a United Kingdom, he did that already, and that's why he was called the King of the Kings, or in Farsi, Shah and Shah. And unfortunately, in a 530, Cyrus went to a campaign against the Massageta tribe, and then he died in the battle. And on the right, you see his picture of his mausoleum in Pasargad, which is about 44 kilometers north of Shiraz. And now you see in the bottom how much people love him as their leader and their ancient king. Now, as I said, in the 13th century later, we want to skip. The reason is because part of it, when the Arabs invaded Persia in about 7th century, they burned all the libraries they could find, and all the books or the material on the skin of animals were all destroyed. So I had a heck of a time really to get a tangible result from that era. But I did find at least about maybe half a dozen chapters, including a chapter on John D. Shapur Science Center, as well as some other scientists of pre-Islam area. In the 8th century, in the greater Khorasan province, a man was born, Muhammad Khwarazmi, and who undoubtedly converted to Islam, and he was born in Khwarazm, which is now part of the Uzbekistan, and he toward his end of his 70-year age, the last years of his life, he spent in Baghdad, because after the Arabs basically destroyed the scientific centers of Persia, they copied that idea into a place in Baghdad during the Abbasid dynasty, and they call that House of Wisdom. So naturally, all the scientists from Persia spend from time or again in part of it in Baghdad. Unfortunately, Khwarazmi died while he was visiting Baghdad toward the end of his life, and he's buried there. This is the map when Khwarazmi was born, and you can see the green part on the right is boundaries of the greater Khorasan, where he was born in Khwarazm, right somewhere in the middle. The most important contribution of Khwarazmi was that he was the first who branched the mathematics as a field into areas like algebra and trigonometry. And he learned about a Hindu mathematician that he has identified a number called 0. He already had 1 through 9 already figured out, and he sent people there of his team to go and find this individual. Unfortunately, by the time they got there, he died. That mathematician had passed away, but they could find some of the books in his library, and they brought it to Khwarazmi, and he designated 0 to be the 10th digit of the decimal system. And then he noticed clearly that to the right of 0, you have all these numbers, and to the left, you have the negative ones. So he created negative numbers, and that led to the creation of algebra and solution of the algebraic quadratic equation you see here. And he also had a world map and a calendar, and he also used astrolabe as a device for computing, which was later on used, as you will see, by Biruni and others. And NASA graciously has designated a crater on Moon under his name. Razi is one of perhaps a renowned physician who is known as the world's first pediatrician, and he discovered alcohol, sulfuric acid, and in 1952, a French historian by the name of Gouchin has been quoted to say that when one thinks of philosophy, you think of Greece, and when you think of medicine, you think of Persia. So Persia has always been very, really forefront in the history on medicine, and you will see much more reason later on. The epic poet of Persia, Ferdowsi, is known to every Iranian all over the world. But I just need to mention to you that he has spent 35 years of his wonderful life to revive the Persian Farsi language. I quoted saying that I have struggled much of these 30 years in order to revive Persia. They call it Ajam, is the Arabic name of it, and Farsi language. His Book of Kings or Shahnameh is the largest, world's longest epic poem written by a single poet. 50,000 couplets, 2-line verses, which was done there. And you see on the right is the mausoleum in Tus, his hometown, and some of his pages of his book. And he also was the first to put miniature type of paintings in his book. Abu Rehan Biruni is a genius and a renowned scientist. He also was born around Kharazm, similar to Khwarazmi, and then today's Uzbekistan, and he's lived about 75 years. One of his major work was the estimation of Earth's radius of the planet Earth. On the upper left side, what you can see here is that, let's say, he probably went to the coast of eastern coast of Caspian Sea, and he chose that area which was very close with a mountain or at least a hill overlooking the water. He designated 2 points on the beach, used astrolabe, which is shown here, and measured. D was known to him because he chose that. He measured theta 1 and theta 2 with respect to the tip of the mountain, and then through the trigonometric equations of Khwarazmi and his own, he figured out the height of the mountain. Then he took the astrolabe and his team, and they walked all the way up to the top of the mountain, timed it in such a way that they would be up there when the sun would set. And then he went to the top of the mountain, as you can see here, and then he measured this angle alpha rather, and when the sun would set. So with the help of alpha and with the help of this angle and additional measurements here, he was able to again use the formula in trigonometry to measure that the radius of the Earth up to about 1% accuracy 1,000 years ago, without cloud, without calculator, without computer, without anything like that. The renowned physician and Pursina which is also called Abyssinia in the west, was born in Afshana near Bukhara to a father and mother. Mother was Setare and father Abdullah. And Abdullah was assigned to go from Balkh to by Samani king to go to Afshane for the tax collection purpose. And then Abdullah met Setare in the Afshane area and fell in love, and the result was two sons. The first one was Hussein, which later on was changed to Pur Sina because of his father's name was Ali and his father's father was Sina. So the Pur Ali Sina is the name that they chose for Hussein. And then the other brother was Mahmud. And at the age of 18, he started practicing medicine in Bukhara. And then Noah ibn Mansur, the Saman king at the time in Bukhara, he was sick and he went there and saved his life. And instead of getting financial reward, he just wanted to have full access to the royal library. And he spent years in that library and basically self-educated himself, self-taught himself everything he needed to know in medicine. And then from there, because of when a kingdom would go away, then he would, his life would be in danger and he would move on to another kingdom. Here is the map when he was born. And he went from there to the Balkh area, then went to Neshabur, went to Tus, went to Gorgan, and then on to Isfahan, and then Hamadan, and then went back to Isfahan, and then essentially passed away with his mausoleum in Hamadan. But he said, quoted as saying, "I grew so big that no city could hold me, but my price went so high that every buyer sold me." And on the social media, he is well known as a man for every 1,000 years. Another genius is Omar Khayyam, and Omar is really misleading about the first name of it. And from my studies, he was Omre Neshabur, meaning he's the man who is going to make Neshabur a lasting location, a lasting name. So because Omr and Omar are written the same way in Farsi, and so people think his name is Omar. So it's Omre Khayyam. And he was a real genius. And he, again, was born in Neshabur and buried in Neshabur as well. Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam was translated by Edward Fitzgerald in 19th century. Fortunately or unfortunately, the Western world, I think that Khayyam is just a poet. He's really not just a poet. He was a top scientist. He was genius in the entire spectrum of knowledge, from mathematics, from astronomy, from astrology, as well as poetry. He was basically says that I was never deprived from any knowledge and any science, little left from secrets that I did not know, though I taught for 70 years, day and night, became known that nothing is known. So he was not even, after all his achievement, he wasn't even satisfied of his own achievement. Rumi is the renowned Sufi poet of Persia. Again, nobody needs to be introducing him, but he, at the age of 12, was born in Balkh, current location in Afghanistan. He and his father, Baharuddin Walad, and the rest of the family decided to move away to our western part of the Middle East, basically going to Byzantine or East Roman Empire, whose capital was Constantinople or Istanbul of the today's location. And in that case, he was safe, and toward the something like a 13 years journey, they took 13 years to get to Konya, today's Turkey, and he ran into a gentleman who was sort of a homeless type of Darwish by the name of Shams of Tabriz, and he basically revived the rest of his life into a real Sufi. And everybody knows about Matnabi and Divan of Shams of him. What impressed me about Maulana, that I ran into a book by an electrical engineering professor, Professor Majid Naini, in 2003 or 2004, and I actually got a signed copy of this book from Professor Naini, Mysteries of the Universe and Rumi's Discoveries. In that book, he went directly into the poems of Maulana and found poems which forecasted gravity, Earth gravity. For example, here he talks about sunlight spinning galaxies and force of gravity. And the sky hails the earth, I am with you as the iron is with the magnet. And then he also did nuclear things, which refers to nuclear explosion and atomic particles. Inside each particle is a hidden sun. Suddenly that opens its mouth, the galaxies and the earth becomes shattered in front of that sun when it comes out of hiding. So that was the point in my 20-year struggle of data collection, that I decided to bring the poet's name on the book title. So Maulana was the key figure in there. And now let's go to my hometown, Shiraz. Saadi of Shiraz is again well known. Is considered as the Shakespeare of the East, and his book on sons of Adams being limbs of each other, having been created of one essence. When the calamity of time affects one limb, the other limbs cannot remain rest, and so forth and so on. So this was a fantastic forecast by Saadi to creation of United Nations. So, and if I have actually visited inside the United Nations, I've seen this in 3 languages, in Farsi, in English and French, on the walls of United Nations. In his 2 books, Bustan and Golestan, there are fantastic, really advice for a better life and better living. In between Saadi and Hafiz, which comes next, was Khaju Kermani, who was a mathematician and a physician and poet, which was spent most of his time in Shiraz after he was born in Kerman. And then he is buried here in what's called the Gate of Quran, in the old entrance of the city, which no longer is the entrance, as you can see, is the park. And he was buried on top of this mountain, which is shown here. And he lived most of his life in Shiraz, as I mentioned. Again, I'm jumping another 5 centuries. During those areas, not as much really, I did not find time or motivation to find more, although I do have quite a few that I obtained by, I'm actually moving somewhere in the middle of these centuries, not just the end of it. So I introduced to you to one of the excellent and prominent Iranian painter, Hossein Behzad, which was born in 1894 and passed away in 1968. And he, you can see his work, and he actually in 1934 he went to Paris and visited the paintings in Louvre and Guimet Museum, Guimet Museum and Palace of Versailles, and created yet another class of paintings which had a feature of both East and West in it. Now, Mohammad Mossadegh, the lawyer, prime minister, a patriot, a national hero, was born in 1882, background from Qajar dynasty, and passed away in 1967. That's his picture as a young boy, and he is known for nationalization of Iranian oil, the first person and Iran, the first country who nationalized their resources, and then since 1913, it was at that time the British Petroleum and the British government, the colonial British empire, was dominating the Iranian oil extracts. Fortunately, when it was nationalized, most of the Iranian reservoirs were still under the earth, and his work and his dedication and his love for his people is amazing. In 1961, Time magazine showed him as the Man of the Year. From age 12, he served his country from various capacities: budget regulator, governor, undersecretary, minister, parliament, and prime minister. And he, at the end of his life, when he was put in house arrest after the 1953 coup d'etat, he had run into cancer, and he would not want to go to outside of Iran for treatment, or even have foreign doctors come and treat him. He said, if that's not available to the Iranian people, why should I use it? In another patriot minister is Amir Kabir, which was the tutor of Nasser before became Nasseruddin Shah in Tabriz, and then he chose him when Nasser became Nasseruddin Shah. He chose him as his prime minister, and he was so capable, he gave him the title of Amir Kabir. But being a patriot and being a doer in almost all countries is a danger to your being, because a lot of people who are not really caring about the masses of the people and their country, and they run into it. Therefore, at the young age of about 30 something, he actually was assassinated in Kashan in a public bath, and then the king was even afraid of his dead body. They sent him to Karbala in Iraq, and he's buried there. He was so visionary. He took care of the budget in the short 3 years that he was minister. He vaccinated Iranian youth. He created a series of schools called Dar al-Funun, and these were the initial seeds to establish universities like the University of Tehran and others. Now let's move into a more recent years. One of my long-term mentors that we lost him about 2 years ago, Professor Fazlullah Reza, who at one time in Melbourne, Australia interview, I called him the modern day Omar Khayyam, because he was a mathematician, he was an electrical engineer, he was an information theorist, and electrical circuit theory, and authority on Persian poetry, especially with respect to life of epic poet Ferdowsi. And he taught, he was first electrical engineering graduate from University of Tehran, and he taught at MIT, Columbia, Syracuse in US, Tehran University, Sorbonne in Paris, Concordia and McGill in Canada. And this picture that you see is me with one of my colleagues, Professor Amir Aghdam from Concordia, and with another colleague of ours. We drove from Montreal to Ottawa, and I brought him a cake with three candles, a long one for digit 1 and 2 short one for 00, and we celebrated his 100th birthday. And this is Shahnameh Hoyat Milli, the Book of Kings, the national identity. This book is his last book, which I have it in my library, and he graciously signed it for me when I met him for that event. He also had a lot of electrical engineering books like Modern Network Analysis and so forth. And I encourage all the Persian peers around the world to read this last message that he left behind before his death. And this is actually in that book that was printed in Tehran. Professor Ali Javan, Iranian physicist who co-invented helium-neon gas laser, he moved to United States at a very young age, right after high school, and then he, for some health reason, and then he got fixed and healthy, and went to Columbia University. And this is something that I read from him because I had the honor of knowing him and visiting him in Boston when he's at his last job at the MIT. And in the Monday afternoon of 1960, with a snowy day in Bell Labs in New Jersey, he finally got the laser to lace, and he basically was very happy about it. And in 2007, the British newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, listed the top 100 living geniuses who were alive. And he was number 12 on that list. And now you see who else was there: Nelson Mandela, Stephen Hawking, Steven Spielberg, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, and Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak is one of the founders of Apple, and George Lucas. So in 2002, in Orlando, Florida, he came to our Congress, World Automation Congress, and we honored him in front of the entire conference. More of that is another mentor of mine, for Lotfi Asgharzadeh, or Lotfi Ezadeh, who was born in Baku when Baku was part of Soviet Union, and at the age of 10, and this is the picture of Lotfi that probably you have not seen. Those people who know Lotfi, all you have seen him with a man without any hair. This is at the age of 7 in Baku. At the age of 10, the family moved to Tehran because his father was Iranian from Ardabil, and his mother was a pediatrician, physician from Moscow. And they, because of the issues with the communist regimes, they moved back to Tehran. And this is a picture of him when he first moved to the United States after World War, or almost toward the end of the World War II. This is probably about 8 or 10 years old picture. And he went to Jordan High School, which later on became Al-Bors High School in Tehran. And he, after that, he entered Danishkadeh Fani, School of Engineering of University of Tehran, and graduated in the third class, and they knew Faz Reza, they knew each other even at that point in the 1938 to 1940 odd years there. And what's amazing about Lotfi, that he in 1965 published a paper called fuzzy sets, which created essentially infinite level of logic. The standard logics are 0 and 1, or Boolean algebra is 0 and 1. He created an infinite logic, and up to about a few days ago, he has 267,271 citations on Scholar Google, and among that, actually 115,000 of it is from that single paper. So he's really in the seventh heaven of citations all by himself. Now, for those of you who haven't seen Lotfi with hair, I want to give it to you. And here is a picture, my last picture with Lotfi in about 2.5 years before he passed away, in his house with Dr. Golan Etemad and his wife and myself, the six of us, along with Faizadeh. The six of us actually spent a long weekend at Lake Tahoe in 1996. And there we suggested that Faye would write a book about their life called My Life and Traveled with Father of Fuzzy Logic, which was translated into Russian and Azeri in Baku, and also now in Persian. Farsi is going to be in Tehran. And his credentials is immense. 30 honorary doctorate degrees, Medal of Honor of IEEE, member of National Academy of Engineering, member of Russian Academy of Natural Sciences. A patriot, engineer, educated pioneer is Dr. Mojtahidi, who is a native of Gilan, and he basically had a lifetime principal of highly prestigious Alborz High School in Iran. And he graduated about 50,000, what he called them, Alborzis. In fact, one of my own brother, who former late cardiologist in Connecticut, actually was one of the Alborzis and one of his students. And he also founded Sharif University, at that time, Aryamer Technical University. And you can see the picture of here in here. And then here's the picture of Alborz High School and some of the first teachers and students of it. He also became president of other universities. One of the recent patriot journalists and poet is Malik al-Shu'ara Bahar, which basically is the king of the poets. He was a patriot and loved his motherland. Please read this later on your leisure time. He was house arrested by Reza Shah, the first king of Pahlavi dynasty during the time of 1920 to 1940. And he, bless his soul. And Ahmad Shamlou is another poet of well-known credentials as a candidate for Nobel Prize in literature. And he also spent a lot of time in jail during the second king, Pahlavi king, including some time in Alamut Castle, close to city of Qazvin. And his work was amazing, 35 years of editorship and journalism and writing and poetry. Amazing person, which you can see it in his chapter. Now we're looking at some perspectives. Dr. Qurban, Zabih Qurban, is from Shiraz, who went to American University of Beirut and graduated in medicine and came back to Shiraz and created auxiliary training schools for training in medicine. And that was the initial effort in Shiraz to essentially, he was able to actually found the Shiraz University Medical School, which is actually is wrong, 1946, not 1846. That's my mistake here. And this is one of those training school auxiliary places, which I actually remembered as a young kid. I once visited that because of a slight injury I had. And this is a picture of the oldest picture of the School of Medicine in Shiraz. Dr. Gharib is a physician, pioneer, and father of pediatrics in modern Iran. He graduated from Paris Medical School, and he created a 1,000 bed medical clinics and center just for children. It's called Children Medical School, and he trained numerous other residents to become doctor. Dr. Masoumi rather, is a product of University of Tehran and residency in Buffalo, New York, and in Milad Fillmore Hospital. And he moved to Houston in 1977 and worked for the rest of his life in St. Luke's Hospital. He was one of the top physicians in electrophysiology, and in 2014, USA Today, the national newspaper, put him as one of the top physicians of the time, and his time was so much in demand. He went in numerous times to the Persian Gulf area and helped the kings over there, and the Sultan of Oman rather, created an endowed chair, Masoumi chair in cardiology and cardiac electrophysiology at St. Luke Hospital to honor him. We miss him a lot because he left very early, and bless his soul. Another physician that we have lost is Dr. Samuel Rahbar, who was a physician, spent most of his life between US and Iran, and he is the discoverer of HbA1c blood test, that those of you who either know about diabetes or you may have diabetes, you are familiar with this test, which is a moving average of 3 months of it. And the American Diabetic Association created a discovery award under his name, which is going on for many years. And he, as I said, been in many places on demand. Going back to Shiraz, Khosrow Nasr was a doctor of gastroenterologist, dedicated leader and a pioneer. He was at one time director of the Nemazi Hospital in Shiraz, one of the first major hospital in the United States, especially in Shiraz. I'm sorry, in Iran, especially in Shiraz. And then this is the new picture of the School of Medicine in Shiraz. Now, in 2009, he published a work created to describe what we call Shiraz model of medicine in the area of 1969 to 1979, just before the revolution. And the pillars of that Shiraz model, which was unique in Middle East and was WHO used that for a model school and a location for training doctors from other parts of Middle East. The pillars were 6 of them: English instruction language, Nemazi Hospital, creation of a regional university, full-time medical faculty, which is very important, hospitable city of Shiraz, and smart and capable incoming students. And another innovator is a former friend of mine who also passed away very young, was Musa Arman, who was a native of Yazd. He spent his physics education at Shiraz University, and then later on, doctorate at UCLA. He spent about 20 years at Air Force Research Lab in New Mexico, created the future weapons of the country, essentially, by using high power microwave directed energy. It was such an important issue that even after he completed his work, he could not go back to his old work and see what he had done. It was off the limit to everybody, including the creator. And the future defense of this country, to some extent, owes it to Musa for later on. Another fantastic, successful and pioneer inventor of ophthalmologist is Dr. Ghulam Peyman, also from Shiraz. At the age of 19, he moved to Germany and at the University of Freiburg and got his doctorate degree in ophthalmology. And then in 1982, he ran into some new laser focus, and then he was able to create a LASIK eye surgery. And in 2011, somewhere around that, he received the National Medal of Technology from former President Obama. Dr. Ismail Bighi is another member of the Shiraz model, and he along with Dr. Asghar Rastegar, they helped Khosrow Nasr to really build a very powerful and very efficient medical school there. One of my other brother actually graduated, who's an orthopedic surgeon in Tehran now. He graduated from that same university. And Faramarz actually was able to help stop the brain drain of their graduate to go to US or Europe, and they never come back. So they created a special post-residency training for them, and a good, attractive job to attract at least some of them to come back. Dr. Jamshid Qajar is the neuroscientist innovator, and he's in charge of Brain Trauma Research Laboratory, and currently he also is a clinical professor of neurosurgery at Stanford. Dr. Brumand is a gentleman that I have the honor of knowing quite some time. He's a father of nephrology in Iran. He has not only one, but 3 board certification. In Iran, he has trained 200 or more nephrologists all over Iran. And he is an amazing person, and now he spends most of his time not only helping in medical field, training, he also has a lot of non-profit donation activities, building schools and building clinics for Iranian people. Shiraz Medical School even now is really very respectable. This is one reason for that. Dr. Malik Hosseini, he's a physician, liver and kidney transplant. For the past several years, he has done 5,000 liver and 5,000 kidney transplant in Shiraz, and he spent time both in Shiraz and Tehran medical schools, as well as a fellowship at University of Pittsburgh, and he's gracefully and deservedly called father of Iran's liver transplantation. Dr. Jad Babayi is another pioneer. He created, established University of Sistan and Balochistan, one of the most deprived area of, unfortunately, Iran, which has still in that predicament. And he also president of Amir Kabir University, used to be called Polytechnic. And he also co-founded Shiraz University of School of Engineering, where I used to serve for 7 years. One of young scientists, engineer, earth system scientist, Soroush Surushian, who is also going to be writing a foreword in the book. And he is a Zoroastrian. He was born in a Zoroastrian family in Kerman, and he has numerous awards that I can spend probably half an hour talking about Soroush. He is a member of National Academy of Engineering. He's a member of the World Academy of Sciences, and he also was recognized in hydrologic science, received the Sciences Medal, and many other awards. As I mentioned, you can go to his pages in the book to get to know him better. In the area of a movie, we have Dr. Mr. Badii, who is the film director. He's the first Iranian director who directed movies and TV programs in Hollywood. And those of you who are as young as I am, you may remember Mission Impossible, $6 million Man, Mary Tyler show where Ed Asner and Mary Tyler was doing every week. We were watching these shows very eagerly, but at the time, very little did we know who was the director of it. Majid Majidi is a film director, which is one of the first Iranian directors to be nominated for an Oscar. Dr. Mahmoud Hesabi, the nuclear physicist and diplomat, he has done so much for the country. He launched many different things, including establishing the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, and launched the first seismology center of Iran. And in his perspective, there are at least 24 of these kind of launches. Launch. Yeah. And then here you see a Medal of Legion of the French government is done because he is a graduate of American University of Beirut and Sorbonne. Farhadi is again well known to Iranian people. He is the winner of 2 Academy Awards by looking at his background, and I have shown it in his chapter. He has at least 60 or 70 tangible awards and medals all over the world, and this is only one of those many of those. A good old friend of mine, when I was at NASA, I ran into Qasem Asrar, who was associate minister of NASA for Earth Sciences, another scientist and engineer from Shiraz, graduate from Shiraz University and Michigan State. He was the chief scientist of the NASA Earth Observing System. He created 20 Earth science missions on behalf of NASA, and he currently is the vice president of University Space Research Association. Very modest man and very down to earth, and a wonderful scientist. Engineer and Captain Jasmine Moghbeli is the most recent, among the most recent astronauts that among 3,000 candidates, or rather applicants, he is one of the 22 on that. He could potentially be the first or the second woman to be landing on the moon. And and this was actually reported at Science Technology Daily in just past January. He is a test pilot, graduate of MIT for aerospace aeronautic engineering and Naval Postgraduate School for a master's degree. Dr. Birka is the Nobel Prize winner of mathematics, which is called Field Award. He is at the age of, I think, 38, became full professor of Cambridge. And you can see him, he's originally from Kurdistan, and he is now have a new Kurdish name, Kaucher Birker. He was born as Feridun Darakhshani. Another young shining star among the Persian community in the world, now in the US, is Professor Mohammed Shahidepur, who is at the Illinois Institute of Technology, a graduate of Sharif and University of Missouri, Columbia. He is an amazing again, very down-to-earth individual. He recently was named as the highly cited researcher in engineering, something around 40,000. And he brought about $60 million to his university and turned Illinois Institute of Technology campus into a smart grid and much, much more. And he's again member of National Academy of Engineering and many other honors. And I'm very proud to be his friend. One of my old friends in Tehran, among our wonderful Armenian compatriots, was Karol Lux, who was basically due to medical mistake in Tehran. Unfortunately, he died much younger than he should have. He has 1,200 published work, including 39 chapters, 332 journal papers, 826 conference papers, but more importantly, he graduated numerous master and PhD students. Bless his soul, and we miss him, and I used to visit him in Tehran, and in fact, one time he even taught for 1 hour in one of his courses. One of the saddest of all these is also Maryam Mirzakhani. I have a chapter for him. He was the first woman in world to receive Fields Award, again, also known as Mathematics Nobel Prize. He's a product of both Sharif University and Harvard University in mathematics. He solved several 19th century open problems for the Riemann geometry. And this is a picture of German 19th century German mathematician Riemann. Ironically, both Riemann and Mirzakhani lived to be only exactly 40 years old. And the world community misses him so much. What would she would have done if she had lived another 40 years? Who knows? Last but not least is my mentor, Farhang Mer, another wonderful Zoroastrian family person. He was raised as a devout Zoroastrian and a patriotic Iranian. He was president of Pahlavi University, now Shiraz, during the period that I was there, and up to 1979, toward the end of his post-revolution time. He joined Boston University and developed a Center for International Studies and received various different medals from both in Iran as well as one from the governor of Massachusetts. Now the presentation is almost done here now. We will have 4 free copies of the book, electronic ones, and we have 2 printed ones. One will be in Farsi, which is 60% finished in Tehran and in Texas are being translated. And then, of course, we also have an English version, which I will plan to publish in US. And these are the table of contents. And in conclusion, I'd like to welcome you by giving any comments, any suggestions that you may have, and if any urgent missing name that I should include, I try to do my best, especially in the Persian version of it. Thank you very much, and I thank you for your attention, and I'm sorry I went a little bit too longer than I should.